His lawyer leaned down and whispered 5 words, just 5 words. And Daniel Carter's face, the smug face I'd seen for 15 years at the breakfast table, suddenly turned pale. His hands began to tremble. The papers he'd eagerly signed now shook violently, as if they were betraying him. And I, for the first time in 3 years, smiled. But I'm going too fast. Let me go back to the beginning, because you need to understand how we got to this point, how a woman everyone thought had given up was silently playing the longest game of her life. My name is Megan Carter. I'm 34, and until 3 months ago, I was Daniel's wife. 15 years of marriage. Longer than most of those glamorous relationships out there, and certainly longer than I should have had the patience for. But I'm stubborn. I inherited that from my grandmother. I met Daniel when I was 17. I graduated from high school early, not because I was exceptionally brilliant, but because I was practical, goal-oriented, and eager to leave my parents' home. I landed a small job at a local law firm in Raleigh, starting from the lowest position. Minimum pay, maximum chores, but it was mine. By 18, I was a legal assistant. I was good at details, good at numbers, and best of all, good at knowing when to be quiet and observe. Daniel was 24 then. We met at a client event. He was charming, ambitious, always talking about the future as if it belonged to him. He talked about building a real estate empire, about success waiting for him just to step in and seize it. He said he would create something great. I said I could help him perfect his paperwork. It was a very practical kind of romance. We got married when I was 19. Our son, Ethan, was born when I was 20. I continued working part-time at the law firm, raising our child while saving every penny for my retirement. My grandmother always said, a woman needs her own money, not hidden money, just her own money, something no one can take away. When I was 23, Daniel's career began to flourish. He asked me to quit my law firm to support him full-time. He needed someone to manage the books, work with clients, connect with contractors, someone he could absolutely trust. And so I became everything without pay accountant, office manager, project coordinator, logistics manager for the model homes, event organizer, and the one who kept the whole family running. My official title was wife. The real title was everything else. For 11 years, I poured all my energy into building his dream, and for those 11 years, Daniel received all the praise, all the recognition, all the applause. At every industry event, I was introduced as Daniel Carter's wife. At every celebration, he thanked his team, his mentors, his vision. There was only one thing. He never truly thanked me. Everything started to change very subtly. Daniel began making decisions without consulting me. He came home later more often, always using work as an excuse. Then he started nitpicking about the smallest things, how I dressed, the meals I cooked, even what he called my lack of ambition. Lack of ambition. While I was running the entire logistics department for his company, unpaid, raising the children, and keeping his life running smoothly, but yes, maybe I wasn't ambitious enough. Then, 3 months ago, he dropped a bombshell. One Tuesday evening, he came home earlier than usual. I was cooking dinner, his favorite dish, because I always seemed to be striving for unappreciated efforts. He told me to sit down at the kitchen table. His face wasn't sad, not remorseful, just cold, as if we were discussing business. I want a divorce, he said. Then immediately afterwards, and I want the house, the cars, the company, everything. You can keep Ethan. He said it as if he were ordering food. I take the assets. You keep the child. Thank you. Keep Ethan, as if our 15-year-old son were a discarded item, to be left behind for convenience. I just sat there looking at him. 15 years of marriage, ending right there at the kitchen table, between the salt shaker and the butter dish. as if I too were just an object being cast aside. At the time, I didn't know, and it would be a long time before I understood that Daniel had been planning this for months. He had a lawyer, Thomas Reynolds, expensive and experienced. He was preparing his escape route while I was still planning menus and scheduling dentist appointments for the whole family. I was completely taken by surprise by the man I had trusted so much. The next day, his mother showed up. Margaret Carter, the woman who had treated me like a maid for 15 years, arrived with perfectly groomed hair and a carefully practiced, sympathetic smile. She patted my hand and said I should have tried harder to keep my husband happy. "Men have their own needs, my dear," she said, her voice sounding as if she were explaining something incredibly complex to a slow-witted child. Her marriage advice always intrigued me, especially when her husband spent 7 days a week on the golf course to avoid sharing a room with her. But yes, I was definitely the problem. The first week was a mess. Daniel moved me into the living room. Paperwork was drafted. Separation plans were drawn up. Schedules were set. Everything happened so fast, and I felt like I was sinking. Everyone saw a woman who had just lost her whole world, a wife cast aside after 15 years of devotion, a victim who didn't realize what was happening. But there was one thing Daniel didn't know, and no one else knew. 3 years earlier, I had discovered something buried deep within his financial records, something he believed had been hidden forever. And from that moment on, I had been quietly preparing. If you're following this story, please subscribe and let me know where and when you're watching. I read all the comments. Thank you. Back to the mess. Within a week of the divorce announcement, Daniel had completely taken control. The living room became my permanent dwelling in what used to be my house. My closet was reduced from a dressing room to 2 small compartments, the part he generously allowed me to keep. The message was clear. This was no longer my home. 2 weeks later, he started bringing Olivia Brooks home. 27 years old. She works at his company, of course. She has the perfect social media look, bright dyed hair, flawless nails, workout clothes that cost more than my weekly living expenses. She walks into my kitchen as if it belongs to her. She wears my apron, my grandmother's apron, and makes smoothies with my blender. She's younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but she makes delicious smoothies, so maybe that's a plus. Daniel takes her around like a trophy. They sit on my sofa, watch my TV, eat from my plates and bowls. He puts his arm around her shoulder right in front of me, as if I were a piece of furniture, as if I didn't exist. The humiliation increased every day. First, he canceled my personal credit card. "We need to separate our finances," he said, sounding perfectly reasonable. Then the joint card. Then he suggested that perhaps I should find somewhere else to stay while I sorted things out. My own house and I was being asked to leave. Margaret came to help me pack. And by help, I mean she rummaged through my belongings and decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes. Okay. Family photos. Partly. My grandmother's recipe box, she stopped there, as if considering whether to take it too. Things I wasn't allowed to take any jewelry Daniel had bought over the past 15 years. Any furniture I chose. Anything. And according to her, Daniel had a right to all of that. She packed my things in garbage bags. Not cardboard boxes. Garbage bags. As if I were something being thrown away. In all of that, there was one person I thought I could trust. Lauren Mills. We'd known each other since high school. 20 years of friendship, through broken relationships, restarts, children, and everything in between. Lauren was the first person I called after Daniel announced his decision. She was so caring, always texting, always asking if I was okay, always ready to listen. She brought me alcohol so I could cry on her shoulder. She said I deserved better, She said Daniel was making a huge mistake. But something was wrong. The little details. Initially, Daniel seemed to know my plans even before I told her. When I mentioned to Lauren that I was thinking about keeping the house, Ethan came home the next day and said, "Dad said that's not feasible." When I told Lauren I was looking at apartments in a certain area, Daniel blurted out that it was too expensive for me, and then everything fell into place. Looking back, I should have seen it years ago. The way Lauren lit up whenever Daniel walked into the room, the way she complimented him a little more, laughed a little louder at his jokes. She always asked about him first whenever we talked. How was Daniel? How was work? Was he happy? She had secretly admired my husband for 15 years. And Daniel, who always liked being surrounded by admirers, knew exactly how to capitalize on that. He made her feel special, feel chosen, unlike anyone else. Perhaps he even planted the idea in her that after the divorce, there would be some kind of chance. There was only enough hope to keep her on his side. My best friend had become his informant, 20 years of friendship for a few flirtatious words and empty promises. At least, she should have demanded more. But the worst thing wasn't Daniel, not Margaret. Neither was Lauren. The worst thing was Ethan. My son saw it all. The new woman, Grandma packing Mom's things, Dad's gaze at Mom as if she were worthless. And Daniel was influencing him every day. Every little thing he said. Mom and Dad made things harder. Dad just wanted everyone to be happy. Dad was trying to be fair, but Mom and Dad wouldn't cooperate. Ethan started to distance himself from me, not exactly angry, just confused and bewildered. He didn't know who to trust, and his dad was very convincing. I could lose the house. I could lose the money. I could lose everything I'd built over 15 years. But seeing my son start looking at me as if I were the problem that was the real pain, it was a wound no one could see. I hired a lawyer, Rachel Whitmore, recommended by my old office, 52, sharp, impatient with beating around the bush. She reviewed my file and presented a very clear plan. "You helped build this company," she said. "You have rights to half of everything, the house, the business, the accounts. We're going to fight." I stared at her for a long time. What if I don't want to fight? Rachel looked at me as if I'd just spoken another language, as if I'd just offered to send Daniel a thank you fruit basket. She thought I was exhausted, thought I'd given up, thought I was no longer capable of standing up for myself. She didn't know. I moved into a tiny apartment with Ethan. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen smaller than my old walk-in closet. Half the boxes were unopenable, stacked in the corner of my son's room as a marker of how far behind we'd fallen. Meanwhile, Daniel posted a picture with Olivia Brooks. "New chapter, new energy. Grateful," he wrote. Margaret commented below, "I'm so happy for you. You deserve happiness." Everyone had advice. Everyone thought they knew what I should do. Everyone saw a woman who had given up, unable to fight, letting her husband dominate her. They were all wrong, because when you're underestimated, people stop paying attention to you. They stop being cautious. They stop hiding, and that's when you know everything you need to know. 3 years. That's how long I carried this secret. For 3 years, I knew the truth about Daniel Carter's glamorous but empty empire. It all began on a very ordinary Tuesday evening, 3 years before this marriage officially ended. Daniel was working late again. At that time, he was almost always late. Though I didn't really understand what that meant then, I sat with the company's books, reconciling accounts, doing the quiet work that kept the business running. And then I noticed something strange, a transfer to an account I didn't recognize, then another, then a repeating chain. Money was leaving our accounts, flowing to places I'd never seen before. I dug deeper. I stayed up until 3 in the morning, following every lead. What emerged chilled me to the bone. Daniel had borrowed money against everything we owned. The house, the beautiful house everyone admired, had 3 mortgages. The first for $400,000, the second for $350,000 signed 4 years earlier. The third, another $350,000 signed 2 years later. The total debt was $1.1 million, while the real value of the house was only about $850,000. We were $250,000 behind on a house I thought I owned. The company was even worse. Our credit limit was $200,000 exhausted. We had $85,000 in back taxes, $120,000 in supplier debt, $75,000 in equipment loans. The business Daniel boasted about at every party, the supposedly thriving business, was actually drowning in nearly $500,000 in debt. Even the cars weren't ours. All 3 were leased. With large payments due soon, we didn't really own anything. We were just burdened with very expensive monthly expenses. I sat in the kitchen at 3 a.m, surrounded by stacks of printed papers, and began to calculate. Total debt approximately $1.9 million, total net worth. If we were lucky, around $1.6 million, we were at least $300,000 in debt. Possibly more. So where did the money go? I continued tracing each transaction for weeks afterward, and the picture gradually emerged, clear and heavy. Cryptocurrency investments, $180,000 all gone, gambling expenses. $75,000 vanished. An apartment I didn't even know rented to a woman I didn't know. Either $60,000 for rent and furnishings. Lifestyle expenses that never made it home, watches, suits, trips I wasn't invited to, another $85,000. My husband hadn't built an empire. He was building a castle out of paper, piled high with borrowed money. We looked as rich as a mannequin, convincing from afar, but hollow up close. My first instinct was to confront him, to demand an explanation, to ask for answers. But I understood Daniel. I'd watched him for years. If I spoke up, he'd twist the story, make me doubt myself, and then find a way to blame me. Worse, if he knew I knew, he might try to get his hands on my own money. Because I always had a little bit of my own. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. A woman needs her own money. I had a retirement account from my years at the law firm. I'd transferred it to another account when I left, but never touched it. It had reached about $180,000 then. That was my money. It was earned from my work. By law, it's my separate property. And then there's my grandmother. She died when I was 28 and left me $340,000. Her will was clear. This money was solely for Megan. I kept it in a separate account for 6 years, unmixed, not for family expenses. My grandmother kept her own account for 50 years, not hidden money. She always said, just her own money. The smartest woman I've ever known. In total, I have about $520,000 completely legal, completely separate, completely mine. So, I didn't confront Daniel. I chose to protect myself. I worked with my uncle, a retired accountant, to set up an irrevocable trust for Ethan. My retirement account and inheritance went into it. I wasn't named as a beneficiary. Daniel certainly wasn't. That fund was solely for my son's future college, his first home, necessities, and no one could touch it. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage, every hidden account, every suspicious transaction. I printed copies and sent one set to my sister. One set I kept in a bank safe. One set I stored on a secure hard drive. And then I waited. I knew Daniel would leave eventually. Men like him will eventually leave. They get bored, or they find someone younger, or they decide they deserve more. I just need to be ready for that moment. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of watching him dig his own hole deeper. 3 years of smiling at dinner parties, knowing full well my life was on quicksand. I became very good at being patient and very good at pretending not to know my husband was dragging the whole family down. When Daniel finally asked for a divorce, when he demanded the house, the cars, the company, everything, I almost laughed. He wasn't asking for the assets. He was asking for the debt. He just didn't know it yet. Back to the present. I sat across from Rachel Whitmore and placed 3 thick files on her desk. 3 years of evidence, every mortgage, every loan, every hidden account. She read in silence for almost an hour. When she looked up, her expression had completely changed. You've known about this for 3 years. I was waiting for him to leave. I said, I knew it would come, and when he demands everything, he'll take all the debt. He just didn't understand. Rachel leaned back in her chair. The pity vanished. The worry was gone. Instead, there was something akin to admiration. So when you signed the transfer of assets, she said slowly, you left clean. He took the mortgages, the business debt, the lease obligations, all in his name. And my inheritance, my retirement fund, my separate, unmixed, legally protected assets is safely in a trust for my son. Rachel was silent for a long time, then she smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. Mrs. Carter, she said, I think I owe you an apology. I thought you'd given up. I smiled back. Everyone thinks so. That's the point. Rachel's gaze shifted from looking at me like a lost soul to looking at me like a chess master. I preferred that way of calling me. The trap was set. The numbers had been checked. The paperwork was flawless. The only thing I needed to do now was to make Daniel believe he was winning. And no one could play the loser more gracefully than a woman who had practiced it for 15 years. The next 3 months were a real acting class. I became exactly the image everyone expected, broken, exhausted, struggling day by day. I showed up at mediation sessions with red eyes and trembling hands. I spoke softly, slowly, like someone who had lost all confidence. I asked for very little, so little that even the mediator felt awkward. I just need enough to start over. I said at the second mediation session, I don't want to complicate things. I know the company is his life. I know the house means a lot to him. I don't want to tear the family apart any further. I proposed a deal, $50,000 in cash, my personal belongings, and shared custody of the children. That's all. Daniel agreed immediately. He was probably prepared for a fight for half everything. Instead, I only asked for scraps. He looked at me across the mediation table with an almost pitying gaze, as if I were a wounded creature he was mercifully allowing to leave. If there were an award for that performance, I deserved at least a golden statuette. The role of my life. And the only audience was my lying, cheating, bankrupt husband. With each passing week, Daniel's arrogance grew. He stopped being careful, stopped pretending to be reasonable. He told anyone who would listen that I wasn't even fighting. She's given up, he told his golf buddy. I offered a fair deal, and she took it right away. His mother was even worse. She bragged at the book club, at church, at every gathering. Daniel kept everything. That woman didn't get a penny. I knew from the start she wasn't strong enough for my son. To celebrate his upcoming victory, Daniel treated himself to a new $15,000 watch. I knew because I saw the transaction in the company account. He was still using company money for personal expenses, still digging deeper into the hole. He wore that watch to the next mediation, deliberately letting me see it. He even took Olivia Brooks to dinner at the French restaurant where we celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. He posted a picture on social media, "Life is great with the right person." The right person. He meant someone who didn't know about his debt. Meanwhile, Olivia began changing my house. New furniture in the living room, new paintings on the walls. She repainted the kitchen gray. Gray. I spent 3 weeks choosing that pale green, 3 weeks testing samples, testing the light, trying to find the perfect shade, and she covered it all in a lifeless gray, as if nothing existed. It suited her personality and her future with Daniel when the truth came out. Lauren Mills still called regularly, inquiring about information under the guise of friendship. I played it perfectly. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of feigned concern. "I just want it all over," I replied, trying to make my voice tremble slightly. "I don't have the strength to fight anymore." Just hours later, Daniel knew. I could almost see him relax, lower his guard a little more. Lauren thought she was manipulating me. Actually, she was just acting as a messenger. While the adults were busy with their games, Ethan was observing. My son, intelligent, perceptive, and very sharp, began noticing inconsistencies. He saw his father's $15,000 watch, but heard him say he didn't have enough money for his trip to Washington. He saw the shopping bags piled high in the hallway, but heard complaints about tight finances. One evening, Ethan came to my small apartment and sat down at the old kitchen table. He looked at me with a serious expression very much like his father's, but with something Daniel had long lost: sincerity. "Mom," he whispered, "is Dad really rich?" I looked at him for a long time. "What do you think?" He was silent, thinking, "I think something's wrong. I think he's faking it." I reached out and took his hand. "Trust me, Mom, just wait a little longer." My 15-year-old son realized the truth in front of both lawyers and a professional accountant. Perhaps I should charge for his college fund. Behind the scenes, Rachel prepared her legal strategy with absolute precision. The main divorce agreement stated that I relinquished all rights to our shared assets: the house, the business, the cars. Everything went to Daniel. In return, I received my small sum of money and left, but attached to that agreement was an appendix, a detailed disclosure of legal liability: each debt, each mortgage, each loan, each obligation associated with those properties. When Daniel signed over all the properties, he legally assumed all the associated obligations as well. The mortgages became his sole responsibility. The business debt transferred entirely to his name. The car leases also his problem. It was all clearly written, black and white, legal, properly done, and irreversible. Legal documents are like poetry, Rachel once told me. Boring, expensive poems, but they can destroy someone's life. The kind of poetry I like best. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Daniel's lawyer called Rachel cautiously. He said his client was receiving too much assets and wanted to request an independent financial review before finalizing the deal. Rachel maintained a neutral tone. "Of course, we're prepared to provide all necessary documentation." But when the lawyer presented this to Daniel, he immediately rejected it. No audit whatsoever. Daniel said, "I built that company. I know exactly how much it's worth. I don't pay accountants to tell me what I already know." His lawyer tried again. He advised verifying the asset value before signing. This was a big decision. Daniel interrupted. "Olivia wants it done quickly, so do I. No more delays." The lawyer had been practicing for over 30 years. He knew when a client was about to make a mistake, and he also knew he couldn't force anyone to listen to his advice. So he handed Daniel a waiver confirming that the attorney had requested an independent financial review and that the client had voluntarily declined despite the advice. Daniel signed without reading, just like he'd signed everything over the years. Never underestimate the power of an impatient girlfriend who makes a man ignore fine writing. Honestly, Olivia was a huge bonus in my legal strategy. The night before the trial, Daniel texted me, "Thank you for not making things ugly." I stared at the message for a long time. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of building his company, raising children, managing his life, and he was thanking me for not causing trouble while pushing me aside. I replied, I just wanted what was best for Ethan. What was best for my son, a safe trust. The future was secure, and a father was about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. Rachel called me that evening. Thursday, 9 o'clock, final hearing. Are you ready? I looked around my small apartment, old furniture, unopened boxes of groceries. The small kitchen I'd painted pale blue because it made me think of hope. I've been ready for 3 years. 3 years of waiting, and finally, it was time. It felt like Christmas morning if Christmas were in a courtroom and accompanied by a financial settlement. Thursday, 9 o'clock in the morning. Daniel would walk into the courtroom, believing he was there to receive his reward. He had no idea he was about to inherit a financial collapse, and he had signed for it himself. The best part, he had requested everything in writing, with full witnesses. If you've made it this far, you already know something very satisfying awaits. Like if you're ready to give Daniel exactly what he asked for, and if you haven't subscribed yet, don't go anywhere. I have more stories like this. Now then, let's end it. Thursday morning, 9 o'clock sharp. The courtroom. I remember every detail. The sunlight streaming through the tall windows, the smell of old wood and polished floors, the rustling of papers from the lawyers. This is where 15 years of marriage officially ended, and where 3 years of patience finally paid off. Daniel arrived first, of course. He was wearing his finest suit, the graphite suit I helped him choose for a client meeting 3 years ago. His new watch gleamed as he shook the lawyer's hand. He looked confident, relaxed, like someone about to sign a very advantageous deal. Olivia stood in the hallway. She wasn't allowed into the courtroom, but she was there to offer moral support, perfect makeup, designer handbag, scrolling through her phone as if it were just another boring appointment. His mother was there too, sitting in the audience, dressed impeccably, probably planning a celebration afterward. She looked at me and gave a small smile, a smile for the man she believed she had won. I walked in a few minutes after Daniel, a simple dark blue dress, no jewelry, my hair in a low bun. I looked tired, collapsed, like a woman who had nothing left to fight for. Perfect. I looked like someone who had given up both life and fashion at the same time. Very convincing. Maybe I should open an acting class. Then the judge walked in. Everyone stood up. She was in her 60s, gray hair, reading glasses perched low on her nose, 30 years in the family chair. She had seen enough tricks, manipulations, and lies. Nothing surprised her anymore. She flipped through the files, then looked up. Carter sues Carter. Final hearing. I understand that both parties have reached an agreement. The judge said. Daniel's lawyer rose first. Yes, Your Honor, my client, Daniel Carter, will receive all joint assets, including the family home, the real estate development business, and related vehicles. In return, Megan Carter will receive $50,000 in cash. Rachel Whitmore rose beside me. Yes, Your Honor. My client agrees to waive all claims to the aforementioned assets and accepts the proposed terms. The judge's gaze shifted to me. She observed my face for a moment, as if searching for signs of coercion, signs of a bad deal that I didn't quite understand. Mrs. Carter, she said slowly, I need to confirm that you understand what you are agreeing to today. You are giving up your rights to substantial assets, the family home, the business you helped build. Are you sure this is what you want? I kept my voice low and slightly trembling. Yes, Your Honor, I understand. And you are entering into this agreement entirely voluntarily. No one pressured you. No, Your Honor. I looked down at my hands, then up. I just want my husband to have everything he asked for. I want it all over. The judge looked at me for another moment. I could almost see the deliberation in her head whether to ask more questions, whether to adjourn, whether to defend me against a decision that seemed so unfavorable. But I had a lawyer. I answered clearly. I was a grown woman making my own choice. Okay, she said finally. Let's continue. The clerk handed out the final documents page after page, all legal jargon, requiring signatures every few pages. Daniel signed quickly, barely glancing at what he agreed to. He wanted to get it over with. He wanted to return to his new life, his new girlfriend, and his new sense of freedom. I signed slowly, deliberately. Each stroke was careful. This was the moment I'd waited 3 years for. I intended to savor it. Across the courtroom, I saw Daniel glance at his mother and smile. She nodded, appearing pleased. In the hallway, his phone vibrated, probably Olivia sending a message of encouragement. He even checked his phone during his own divorce trial. That's the kind of person he always was. Meanwhile, Daniel's lawyer was doing what good lawyers always do, reviewing the entire file one last time. The main agreement was signed, the asset list was signed, the settlement clause was signed. Then he reached for the appendix, the liability statement. I watched his face as he read. I saw a fleeting look of confusion. I saw him flip back a page, then another, as if hoping he'd misread it. But he hadn't. His face turned pale. He leaned toward Daniel, trying to remain discreet. "Sir," he whispered, "we need to talk." Daniel waved his hand, still basking in the feeling of victory. "Not now, it's almost over." The lawyer's voice became more urgent. "You're taking full responsibility." Daniel turned to look at him. "What?" "The liability statement," the lawyer said softly, pointing to the papers. "The mortgages, the business debt, it's all here. You're taking personal responsibility for everything." For the first time, Daniel actually looked at what he had signed. I watched his eyes dart across the numbers. I watched the color drain from his face. House $1.1 million in debt. Market value $850,000. Business $480,000 in gross debt. Vehicle $115,000 in lease obligations. Other personal obligations $200,000. Total debt approximately $1.9 million. Net worth of everything he had just won, $300,000. He hadn't won the lottery. He had just received the bill. Daniel jumped to his feet. The chair scraped against the floor. "That's not right," he said, his voice rising sharply. He looked at me, then at the judge, then back at the papers on the table. "She hid this from me. This is deception," Daniel exclaimed, his voice high and urgent. Judge Holden's voice immediately cut him off, sharp and decisive. "Mr. Carter, sit down. These numbers are wrong," Daniel insisted. "She manipulated the records." "Mr. Carter." The judge's voice brooked no argument. "Sit down." He sat down, but his hands began to tremble. His confident smile vanished, replaced by an expression I'd never seen on his face before: panic. The judge bent down to review the file before her, then looked directly at Daniel. "Mr. Carter, I'm reviewing the liability disclosure attached to this agreement. These are the debts directly tied to the assets you're receiving. Assets in your name, your business, your real estate." She paused, her gaze sharp. "Are you telling the court that you don't know your own financial situation?" The room fell silent. Watching Daniel try to explain why he didn't know his own debts was like watching someone trying to excuse an obvious mistake, long-winded, rambling, and utterly unconvincing. Daniel's lawyer cleared his throat. "Your Honor, I confirm that I recommended my client conduct an independent financial review before this hearing." He declined. "I have written confirmation." He produced the paper. It was the consent form Daniel had signed, confirming that the lawyer had advised a thorough review, and Daniel had refused, going against the advice. The judge glanced at it quickly. "So Mr. Carter was recommended to verify the numbers. He chose not to." She looked up at Daniel. "Is that correct?" Daniel stared at the paper as if it had betrayed him. I I think. Is that your signature, Mr. Carter? A long silence followed. Yes. Then, the judge said clearly, you voluntarily took this risk. You had the opportunity to check. You chose not to. The agreement is in effect. Daniel turned to me, the final desperate blow breaking through his arrogant facade. You know, he said, his voice cracking. You know everything. I looked him straight in the eye, calmly. I've been your bookkeeper for 11 years. Daniel, I know everything. His face changed constantly confusion, anger, betrayal, fear, and then finally, what I'd been waiting for 3 years. Recognition. He understood that no one else had done this to him but himself. I want to withdraw the agreement. Daniel turned to the judge. I don't understand what I'm signing. This isn't fair. The judge shook her head. Mr. Carter, you signed the documents in court, confirming that you understand and agree to all the terms. You have legal representation. You refuse further review. She looked him straight in the eye. Your wife isn't hiding anything. These are your debts, your obligations. The agreement is final. The gavel struck. Ms. Megan Carter, you accept your settlement. Mr. Daniel Carter, you accept all the assets under the agreement along with all associated obligations. This marriage is officially over. I stood up, adjusted my dress, and picked up my handbag. Before leaving, I looked at Daniel one last time. He slumped into his chair, papers scattered, his world crumbling. You said you wanted everything except Ethan, I whispered, and I gave you exactly what you asked for. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. In the hallway, I heard Daniel's voice, reproaching the lawyer, blaming, threatening, and the familiar, calm reply. I advised you to check. I have the document. You refused. Through the glass door, I saw Olivia standing there. Her face changed as she heard everything. She looked at Daniel, really at him, and for the first time saw not a successful businessman, but a man on the verge of collapse. She left before I could reach the elevator. Her heels clicked on the stone floor, quick and decisive. Her departure was faster than her entry into my marriage. At least she was consistent. I stepped outside. The April sun was warm. The sky was blue. The air was light. Behind me, my ex-husband was still talking about injustice and wrongdoing. Ahead of me lies a new life, smaller, simpler, but entirely my own. And for the first time in a long time, I am truly free. And then the company Daniel had spent 15 years building and I had spent 11 years quietly supporting began to fall apart. Within 3 months, he was sitting before lawyers restructuring the company. The man who had once boasted about his empire now had to calculate what was left to salvage. The answer was almost nothing. The perfect sun in Lorraine's eyes began calling relatives, begging for help, visiting house after house with rambling explanations. No one knew about the debts. Some whispered that Megan must have hidden something, that Daniel had been cheated. But the papers told a different story. The mortgages were in his name. The loans were in his name. The misguided spending decisions, the failed investments, the secret apartment all bearing his signature. I heard Lorraine's year-end newsletter that year was very short. Daniel is looking for new opportunities. Yes, opportunities in debt restructuring. All conflicts eventually come to a very balanced conclusion. About a week after the trial, Diane called me. Her voice was trembling. I had no idea things would turn out this badly. I'm sorry. Megan, I never wanted. I didn't answer. No reply. No closing the chapter she was hoping for. There are bridges that shouldn't be rebuilt. There are friendships that don't deserve a second chance. 20 years of history were sacrificed for a few flattering words and empty promises from a man who used others for his own purposes. She called a few more times, then stopped. Perhaps she's still waiting for Daniel to notice her. And perhaps she'll be waiting a long time. Lorraine tried another approach through Ethan. Tell Mom she doesn't know about the money. Tell her to apologize. Tell her she wants to talk. Ethan looked at her, the woman who had packed his mother's belongings in garbage bags, the woman who had sided with his father without asking a question, and calmly replied, "Mom is busy building her own life. She doesn't have time for excuses." Lorraine wanted forgiveness. I wanted peace. And only one of those things happened. Ethan, my intelligent, perceptive, and very observant son, finally understood it all. Not because I explained it, but because he saw it himself. He saw the court records. He heard his father's justifications. He saw Olivia leave. He saw Lorraine panic. He saw the whole facade crumble. One evening, about a month after it all ended, he sat with me in our small apartment. The kitchen was painted a soft blue. The furniture was old. The last boxes had just been opened. "I waited 3 years," he whispered. "I knew from the beginning, and I just waited." I told him that no matter what happened between his parents, the most important thing was that he was protected. A trust. $520,000. Safe, untouchable. He was silent for a moment. Then he hugged me. A real hug. A hug I hadn't received from a 15-year-old boy in months. A hug that said, "I understand. And I'm proud of you." 15-year-old boys rarely initiate a hug with their mothers. I knew I had done something right. The $50,000 settlement helped me settle into my new life rent, a security deposit, a few basic necessities that wouldn't break down, not extravagant but secure enough. The trust fund is still in the same place. Ethan's future, college, maybe his first home someday, a safety net no one can take away. And me, I enrolled in interior design at community school, a dream I put on hold since I was 23 to help Daniel build his empire. Now, I'm building my own dream. I started with the smallest things. My first client was a 52-year-old woman named Sandra, who had just ended a 28-year marriage. She stood in her empty new apartment, her eyes vacant, then turned to me and asked softly, "How do I start over?" I thought for a moment and replied, "One room at a time, one color of paint at a time, one day at a time." We painted her kitchen a soft blue. When she saw it finished, Sandra burst into tears. They were tears of happiness. She said, "The color of new beginnings." About 3 months after everything was settled, Daniel showed up at my apartment door. I almost didn't recognize him. He was thinner, but not in a healthy way. Dark circles under his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. His watch was gone. He looked like someone who had just been through a long battle and lost. He stood in the doorway. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Just almost. "I didn't know things would get this bad," he said, his voice weary. "I was wrong. I know that now. But I didn't mean for things to turn out this way." I leaned against the doorframe, looking at him intently. The man I'd loved for almost half my life. The man who had pushed me aside as if I were worthless. And now, drowning in the consequences of his own choices. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Maybe we can find a way." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't dare say what he really wanted. "My help. You asked for everything except Ethan," I said calmly. "And you got exactly what you asked for. Megan, please." "Goodbye, Daniel." I closed the door. He stood in the hallway for almost 10 minutes. I knew, because I peeked through the peephole while eating ice cream. The best entertainment show I've ever seen. 5 stars. We'll watch it again. That night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, I sat alone in the small living room. On the shelf was a picture of my grandmother. Beside it was the recipe box, the only thing Lorraine almost took. And the most important thing, she was right about everything. I whispered, "Keep your money to yourself. Know your worth. And never let anyone make you feel small." The apartment was quiet, small, unlike the house I'd lived in for 15 years. But it was mine. Every coat of paint, every item, every decision, it was all mine. And for the first time in so many years, I was truly free. Thank you for following the story to the very end. The next exciting content is ready right on your screen. Choose a video to continue the journey. And don't miss the most valuable details. See you in the next story. Love you all.